again, everybody, and welcome to Tiger Sidelines remote style again, alongside Dave Matter and Gabe DeArmond. I'm Bo Bayman. Let's dive right into it. What in the world is wrong with the Missouri men's basketball team? Losers of 3 straight. Jeremiah Tillman unavailable due to a personal reason. Don't know when he's going to be back, but the win against Alabama seems like a long time ago now. I would say, Gabe.
Yeah, obviously. I mean, to me, losing at Ole Miss was alarming in the way it happened, but losing that game alone wasn't that bad. The game against Arkansas, they fought, they didn't win. That was okay. The alarm came Tuesday night in Athens. You can't lose that game, especially not the way they did, which is the same way they've lost 2 or 3 other games this year. So I understand. I don't think it's time to hit the panic button, but I do understand kind of people being concerned.
There's a lot of concern for this team, Dave, and a lot of it is, these double-digit leads that just evaporate and there's no answer. Whether it's calling a timeout, whether it's waiting for somebody to step up, it doesn't matter. It just hasn't happened.
Right. Yeah, it's happened. It's really happened in 4 SEC games where they've had that double-digit lead, either right before halftime or right coming out of halftime, and then it got down to a one-game possession. And they won 2 of them, Kentucky and Alabama, and then they lost 2, Mississippi State and now Georgia. So that's not to say, it all evens out, because that shouldn't happen. If you get up 13 or 15 or 14, if you're good enough to get up by that many, you should be able to hold them off. And it's not just a halftime thing. I mean, everyone asks, well, what kind of halftime adjustments did Tom Crean make? Well, not really. They weren't very good, because the first 5 minutes, they were even worse than they were in the first half. Missouri controlled it again and added to its lead. It's just this game more came down to just a combination of mistakes on Missouri's end that Georgia capitalized on. The bigger question is, why does this happen? Why can't they stop it from happening? Even in the games you win, you still got to ask that after Alabama. Why did you let that happen? And that's the thing that we get asked that all the time. Gosh, I don't know if Konzo knows the answer. I don't know how you know the answer if it just keeps happening. What's the solution?
And he said the other night in post-game after Georgia, he said, I can't keep calling timeouts. I called a timeout. It's not like I can call 2, 3 of them in a row, especially with TV timeouts. He just needs somebody to make a shot or to go up there and not make a turnover that just seems ridiculous.
Well, we so overcomplicate this. And there are a few things that, like, they make people feel good, and so they say them, and it is yell at the refs, get mad in the media, and call more timeouts. I mean, do any of those things really have that big an effect on the outcome of a game? What's Konzo going to do? Call a timeout and say, hey, guys, quit doing stupid stuff? I mean, I don't know what he's supposed to say in these timeouts. The coaching has taken place. Like, they know the game plan. If Xavier Pinson in the 100th game of his career is going to refuse to drive and is going to stand and chuck 3-pointers, then so be it. If Drew Smith in his 5th year in college in a 3-point game is going to throw a lazy one-handed pass that gets intercepted for a dunk in a 3-point play, then like, he wasn't coached to do that, So I think the idea that this is all bad coaching is kind of ridiculous.
Yeah, I have to agree with this, but it is a sign, Dave, and fans are worried. Where do we go from here? Because if it's a monumental collapse, it's going to be bad, and things are going to happen at the end of the season.
Yeah, at this point, they just need a win. I mean, they need something to feel good about themselves so they can get off this slump. I mean, ideally, yeah, it's a lot better if they go to South Carolina and play really well and, not just break the losing streak, but have something really good to feel about, get back to playing the style of play that they've, played for the most part this season. They've got to get back to playing better on defense. There's no doubt about that. They say all the time, well, we're defined by our defense. That's what we hang our hat on. It hasn't been very good. Now, I get it when some of it, yeah, they're allowing some games, some scores to get high. Some of that's just the way that they play now on offense. When you play faster, you create more possessions. The opponent has more possessions, but they can't be letting a team like Georgia shoot transition threes and make a whole bunch in a row like they did the other night. A sound defensive team can't allow that. You got to sprint back and you got to beat them and force them into the half court. That's a game where even without Jeremiah Tillman, they still had a size advantage and they couldn't take advantage of it. I give Konzo and his staff credit for that game for they sort of reinvented themselves and played through Kobe Brown and Parker Brown. They've never done that before. So that was coaching, and it worked. It worked for a half. And then they went away from it. And I don't think coaches want to go away from it. I mean, why do they all of a sudden say, hey, instead of all that just worked, X, why don't you just start jacking up a bunch of early shots? And why don't you throw some passes against the backboard and see how that works? So at some point, your veteran team has to play like a veteran team. And they're for whatever reason, they're not the second half of these games.
Can we talk about that play real quick? Like, what was that pass that Pinson was throwing? Because it was amazing. It was one of my 3 or 4 favorite things I've ever seen in a basketball game. But I have no idea where that ball was going. Like, it was 100 miles an hour.
Did it get deflected? Was he just? I don't know. I watch the games on TV, and I don't like rewinding and going back because I like to have it as live as possible. So I didn't go back on that one, but man, it was wild.
It nearly went over the backboard, and it looked like he threw it straight, like he was throwing it to the 5th row.
It was like one of those things you do in a dunk contest where you launch the ball off the backboard so it'll come out to the free throw line and you can catch it and dunk it.
It can't be understated how much this team is missing Jeremiah Tillman due to the death in his family. It came out before the Arkansas game, and then he didn't play again in Georgia. We don't know if he's going to play against South Carolina yet. Obviously, he's probably one of your 2 best and most needed players. And without him, they've been a different team. Even though they've hung in there, they are just not the same.
No, they're not. And did they need him to win either of those games? Probably not. I mean, you went to overtime against Arkansas, the hottest team in the SEC right now. And then you still had that advantage up front against Georgia, and you had a 13-point lead. So, but would it have helped? Yeah, absolutely. He's their best player. They played through him all year. He's been their best player for most games. And there's nobody on the floor or on that bench who can do the things he does. You have to play differently when he's not available. That said, though, you lose one guy, everybody else has to lift their game to some level. And Kobe Brown did. Parker Brown has in stretches, but not enough guys. I think you got to look at those guys. Drew Smith and Xavier Pinson have to play better, like they did last year when Tillman was out. They played better. They looked like all SEC guards in the second half of last season when Tillman was hurt. We just haven't seen that here lately.
I think it all comes down to X. I mean, Xavier Pinson's got to be better. And as we talked about on this show last week, Gabe, there are sometimes he looks uninterested. I mean, that's just the truth.
And you can live with not playing well, right? It happens. But what you can't really live with is just looking. I think the announcers even said disengaged on Tuesday night, or just not executing the game plan. And Konzo keeps saying after games, yeah, we need him to drive more and get in the lane and initiate the offense. This isn't new. We talk about this every game. You know, I mean, he's clearly saying, we tell him you can't. I mean, coaching is putting them in position to do it. You can't walk out there and make them do it. You know, and that's not taking all blame off Konzo. There are reasons that things have slipped at times, but it's got to be really frustrating when the guy that, I don't know if he's your best player, but I do think he's your most important player. And I think he's your most kind of easy to gauge the team. Like when he's good, you're good. And when he's bad, you're bad. When that guy just seems checked out sometimes, that's got to be really frustrating to deal with.
Yeah, no doubt. Okay, so up next, as Dave said, this is a team that really needs a win. I mean, that's the bottom line. They got a chance at South Carolina Saturday. Tuesday, they're at home against Ole Miss. On paper, 2 winnable games. If they want to right the ship the right way, they have to go 2-0 in my mind.
Right, and then they've A&M after that, who right now is worse than Vandy, is the worst team in the league. So, 3-0 should be what you shoot for. Now, you can only do one at a time, and beating a Frank Martin team on the road is not necessarily easy. They were played without a couple starters in their midweek game this week. So this is what we've been saying all along about this schedule. It gets really light at the end. That can work against you too. I mean, because these right now, Missouri's, it seems like as far as seedings and the postseason and all of that, Missouri's floor drops out a lot lower than the ceiling goes up. So you can only hurt yourself more down the stretch that you can really help yourself. Now, winning at Florida would help yourself. But before that, you got to take care of games like this.
Yeah, absolutely. No matter if Jeremiah Tillman's there or not on Saturday. Let's talk about the women. The women's basketball team, they dropped 2 games, losing to number 1 South Carolina. Then they lost at home to number 24 Georgia. They're 7-9. They were supposed to play Thursday night. That game got canceled at A&M. The ladies had their own injury, and Asia Blackwell shows up in a boot for the Georgia game. Her timeline's unknown at this point. This is a tough and scary time for Robin Pinchton, isn't it?
This, to me, is the same story every year. I mean, yeah, no shame in losing to number 1 South Carolina, no shame in losing to number 24, but that's the SEC. This is the neighborhood you live in now. And so, being close and, hey, we're 6-12, but we're almost 12-6. It just kind of, at some point there has to be progress. And I understand this team's been close this year, but that doesn't really count for much in my mind. I know they have new pieces and transfers, but we're seeing on the men's side, I think some of these teams that struggled early because they weren't together are figuring it out. And now are the Missouri women going to figure it out? I don't know, maybe.
And they got to figure out
a hurry. Yeah, they go to such extremes in the course of a game. That South Carolina game last week, I called my bosses at halftime and said, hey, you might want to make room on the front page of the Post-Dispatch because they're tied with the number 1 team in the country. Actually, they were beating them late in the first half. Then what happens? The onslaught happens that you kind of expect, and South Carolina took over. And then very similar against Georgia. I think it was 19-6 Missouri after just a couple minutes, and then they just get absolutely drilled in the third quarter. So it's, a little similar to what the men are going through. The men have just built up more equity during the year because they've won a lot more, obviously, and figured things out a lot quicker than this women's team has.
And the problem with Robin's team is the same as the men's team. They don't have anybody who can step up. When they need a basket, they can't get a basket.
Yeah, and it's you got 2 scorers and they had really encouraging freshman years, but now you're going to be halfway through their careers and significantly under 500. When are you going to surround them with pieces that will help them? Because that sounds a little overly dramatic. I don't mean it to, but it hasn't happened yet.
Yeah, it's absolutely right. The women will play at home on Florida on Sunday. That'll be at 1 p.m. Okay, we'll take a break. When we come back, we'll check the Twitter feed. You're watching Tiger Sidelines right here on MC22. Welcome back, everybody, to Tiger Sidelines alongside Gabe DeArmond and Dave Matter. I am Bo Bayman. Thanks, as always, for joining us. We're at Tiger Sidelines on Twitter every day, every hour, 24/7. You can send us something. The first one, it's a little breaking news recently, as David Gibbs has decided to go to UCF Central Florida. And so Eli Drinkwitz has to potentially fill a spot. And I guess, I don't know, in February, this kind of seems to me that this is one where it's like, wow, this is not the time you'd be expecting to talk about this, but here we are.
Well, things like this happen after the season. It might be a little bit late with Gus Malzahn getting the UCF job, but the writing's been on the wall that this could happen since David Gibbs wasn't the defensive coordinator. It's real similar, guys. Like, I really want to be the host of this show, and as long as Bo's here, there's not much upward mobility for me. So if I want to host my own regional cable show, I might have to start looking at other regional cable networks. David Gibbs went and found a different regional cable network where he could be the co-defensive coordinator.
That's funny. I want my own Burger Smokehouse deal, but that doesn't happen either. Dave, this is a good point to you had a sit down with Coach Drink, and it's longer online, which I read, and it was really one of the first times you've sat down with him face to face since the pandemic.
First time I've seen him in person other than sitting way up in a press box at a game since March. So yeah, it was good. It was good just to connect and talk face to face, to take a mask off and sit down and have a conversation with somebody, an interview. I touched on it, not knowing at the time that David Gibbs was going to be leaving the staff. I just touched on the defensive staff changes that did happen. And he is like he responds to most things. He said, hey, these things happen. You gotta make changes sometimes, and you just kind of roll with the punches. I don't think we should be surprised now that all 3 defensive assistants that he kept from the Barry Odom regime are now gone or in the process of leaving with Gibbs moving on. That's just, I always think when that happened, those situations, they can work out sometimes. Other times it just the natural thing to happen is those guys move on and the head coach ends up going out and finding his own guys. And it appears that's going to happen again.
And also these assistants, like 2 years is a long time for an assistant coach to stay somewhere. These dudes move like no other job in America. And, you know, it's funny, like if nobody's hiring your coaches, then it's a problem because, our coaches aren't good enough for anybody else to hire them. But if your coaches take other jobs, then there's panic of, oh my God, we're losing coaches. What are we going to do? I mean, head coaches know this is going to happen. Look, Nick Saban's staff changes more than any staff in the country because his guys keep getting jobs, right? If Eli Drinkwitz is good, he's going to have to hire 2 or 3 assistants every year.
Our next tweet says, what is the NCAA tournament going to look like? I'm not sure we absolutely know this yet, but they're still planning on having the tournament. And coincidentally, they're planning on having the SEC tournament.
Right. And the NCAA tournament, 6 courts in the state of Indiana are going to host the games, 4 of them in Indianapolis, and then West Lafayette, Purdue, and then in Bloomington and Indiana. The others are going to be in Indianapolis. There's still some protocols they got to work out. I mean, they've got this thing where anybody that arrives on site has to have 7 straight days of negative COVID tests. And that's for most of those teams, they're going to be coming from a different site from the conference tournament, Nashville being the site of the SEC tournament, which as of today, it's still on. It's still going to go on as usual. They haven't said anything yet about fans. I imagine there'll be some pretty strict capacity, rules set there for that, but still haven't heard that. They still may be working that thing out.
Well, and the big change is just when the games are played. The first 4 isn't Tuesday. The first 4 is now Thursday. And then those teams will play again Saturday, Monday. The first rounds are Friday, Saturday, then second round Sunday, Monday. And I don't know, Dave, I think that's basically to give teams enough time to get there and test however many times they have to test once they're on site.
Right. And also teams, I think the rule is if you're 350 miles from Indianapolis, your campus, you can't fly. They want you to take a bus. And I'm sure some of that is just they want fewer teams all coming to the Indianapolis airport at the same time just to cut down on crowds. What's interesting is Missouri, if you do a Google map search, Columbia is 360 miles from Indianapolis. So no matter how you may measure it from a different area of town, but they're right there on the cusp.
I don't know exactly how many miles Columbia, Missouri is from Omaha, Nebraska, but I can tell you that there was a kerfuffle over the fact that Mike Alden had that team bus to the Omaha regional site in 2012, the day before they lost to Norfolk State. So if Konzo can get a plane, I think Konzo better be getting a plane because that's one less thing you can blame a loss on.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And hopefully this team rebounds in time to make a run in the NCAA tournament. Okay, thanks for the questions. Don't forget, we're at Tiger Sidelines. We'll take a break. When we come back, we'll talk about some diamond sports starting up, and softball's already started. We'll talk about that and more when we come back. You're watching Tiger Sidelines on NC22. Welcome back, everybody. This is Tiger Sidelines. Gabe, Dave, and Bo here, and it was a pretty decent weekend for the wrestling team. Number 5 Wrestling came away with 3 champions at the Cowboy Challenge down at Oklahoma State. Junior Dak Punky won at 125. Freshman Josh Edmond won at 141. And Brock Mahler, the junior, won at 149. Mahler was named the MAC Wrestler of the Week. Freshman Trey Crawford, Sean Harmon, and Dwayne Filipondo each won 3rd place. And Mahler was really the only starter who wrestled. It kind of shows the depth of this team right now for Brian Smith as they go on. And now the next step is they have a week off, and the MAC championships will be on February 26th and 27th. That's out in New Jersey. And it'll be the first flight for the wrestling team. And I'm not going to lie to you, they're a little worried about it because they haven't flown before and they want to get out there and get all set up. And I think they're probably going the day before to try to get ready for the MAC championships and then they'll have 2 weeks before the NCAAs, but they want to keep everybody healthy because this is the most important time of the year.
I'm going to go out on a limb and say Missouri's favored to win the MAC title.
Good point. They are, yes. They've only won it, 8 years in a row? They'd be going for 9 right now, in a 10th straight conference championship. But yes, they'll be in New Jersey in a week, and that's when they're going to – it's go time now. And they know that, and that's why they've wrestled more than pretty much every other team in the country just because they've had duels, 2 duels, 3 duels every weekend. So they're ready to go for sure. And speaking of ready to go, this is unbelievable, but the softball team started this past weekend. They dealt with some weather issues down in Florida, not like we've dealt with, but they had a pretty decent weekend. They started off 3-1. They swept Memphis in 2 games and split with number 12 Florida State, lost the first one, but came back and won the second game against the Seminoles. And that 3-1 start against some pretty decent competition is really good.
Bunch of home runs in that first day. I know that Hattie Moore had 3, I think, in the first 2 games. And it's impressive that we'll talk about baseball too, that they're able to get anything done in the actual games, considering they're under a foot of snow back home. And I can't imagine they've been outside at all doing anything of value before they get to these games. So a really good start for Larissa Anderson's team.
Yeah, no doubt about it. They'll go back to Florida. They're going to try to – they were supposed to go to Texas, if I'm not mistaken, this weekend. That all got canceled because of all the snow down there. So they're going back to Florida, and they're trying to pick up games. I think they have Iowa State and Florida Atlantic and maybe Central Florida next week. So they're trying to patch it together, I think, if I'm remembering right.
Well, and I don't understand every year why, baseball and softball season start on Valentine's Day and they go into June. They're probably the longest seasons in college sports. And Missouri's at a huge disadvantage in this league. For multiple reasons. A, you got to go out and recruit kids and say, well, yeah, the first quarter of your season's on the road. Like you're going to be doing homework on the bus and all that. And also, like Dave said, they've been practicing like in Divine or in their little hitting facility. I think it really is it kind of exemplifies how hard it is to compete in this league with the disadvantages you have playing in a northern state. Although again, Missouri is in the Eastern Division of the Southeastern Conference. So everybody forgot to look at a map when they made these deals, but.
Well, and not only that, you know as well as I do, you could be playing on May 15th in Missouri, right, and it can be cold.
Well, you can be playing on the 4th of July, and at Simmons Field, you probably need a heavy coat and a blanket. It's going to be miserable there.
Yeah, no doubt. Let's talk about the baseball team. They go out to Arizona. I believe they're in Phoenix for 3 this weekend, but they got to get rolling, and they're going to play a non-conference schedule before a full SEC schedule. So it's pretty much regular for them.
Yeah, it really is. And they're playing a lot of regional non-conference games once the season gets started, playing St. Louis U, they're playing Kansas State. So they don't have to travel too far for those games once they get going. They are supposed to host a series next weekend. I don't know how that's possible, but best wishes if they can get that done. But I hope they've got some pretty heavy coats to wear in the dugout down there. Steve Beazer likes his team. They were playing so well last year when COVID hit and they had to shut it down. They had won 7 in a row, but even now though, these non-conference games mean a lot more this year because they can make the postseason. Last year they were playing under that postseason ban and their only goal was to win the SEC regular season. So now every game matters. He likes his team. He likes their lineup. They return a lot from last year. And you got a Columbia kid as their Friday night starter. Spencer Miles is their number 1 pitcher. So he broke that news on Zoom the other day when Miles was on the Zoom. He didn't know that yet. So it was kind of a neat moment.
I believe the first pitch for the first game is around 4:00 Columbia time on Friday. We go back to Dave, our gymnastics correspondent. A big win for Missouri as they beat number 19 Auburn 196.175 to 196. The Tigers now 1-4 on the year, but a Big win for the gymnastics team.
Peaking at the right time. You hit that 196 threshold and you're good enough to beat the other team. What are they? Probably still middle of the pack in the SEC, but also top 20 nationally or close to that. So that's my analysis.
There you go. Number 16 volleyball lost 2 at Tennessee. They lost 3-2 and 3-0 to start the second half of the season. They will host Georgia on Friday and Saturday. And as of right now, those matches are still on because there are more and more volleyball matches that are being postponed in the SEC.
Yeah, better to lose to Tennessee than to COVID. So this is progress for the volleyball team. What a disjointed season. And it's like, look, I don't have any explanation for it, but it does seem that's the sport that's really been involved and hit by this harder than any other, which is really kind of strange. I have no idea why.
Yeah, you're right about that. Last thing before we go, how does Mizzou rebound the basketball team and get back to the winning ways, especially in games that they need to win?
The how doesn't really matter. It's just that they do, right? And, I think also we have to take a step back. As long as they just beat South Carolina and Texas A&M and, I don't know, maybe get the Vandy game back, like they're going to make the tournament. They would have to completely fall apart to not make the NCAA tournament. Seeding and all that, I get it. But for this program, it's been 11 years since you won a tournament game. The goal is, and I know this team wants more, and a week ago we all thought maybe it could get more, but get there and win a game. And if you take a step back from that, that's significant progress for Missouri basketball.
Yeah, no doubt.
You still can't erase those quad one wins they had this year. I know it losing 3 in a row is no fun especially when you're blowing leads like this, but you look at the body of work, and that's what the NCAA committee will do. They look at the body of work, and they don't care if that Illinois win was in December or the first weekend of March. It still counts. So I know everybody focuses on just what's going on right now, and we're prisoners of the moment, but when you look at their resume compared to everybody else, most teams not named Baylor and Gonzaga go through some stretches like this, but they've got to pull out of it. If this goes through a 3-game losing streak to 4 to 5, then it's panic time. It really is.
Yeah, no doubt about it. We'll talk about it next week. Thanks, as always, to Gabe and Dave, and thanks behind the scenes to Matt and Brian. I'm Bo Bayman. We'll see you next week on Tiger Sidelines right here on MC22.